So are we here?
Okay, we are here. That's so weird on the delay. I don't know. The timing is different. I think there's a little bandwidth issue on my end, so I don't know how long you've been waiting, but it's like I'm in limbo. Anyway, hey guys, how you doing today?
We're doing well. How's everything in Maine and how's everything in Kentucky, Aaron?
Just splendid.
Just what?
Just splendid.
Splendid. Yeah, Maine's good. The weather's cooling off. I can feel the fall air coming, which really gets me excited. So, hey, everybody. My name is Ken Quinn. I want to welcome you to the U.S. Term Limits Live Facebook broadcast. And Ken, why don't you introduce yourself and then Aaron, and I'll wrap it up here.
Well, my name is Ken Clark. I'm the regional director for U.S. Term Limits in the Southern region. And it is a pleasure to be here again this Thursday. Last Thursday, I was in Florida at our new corporate offices down there, and that was a lot of fun. And so I missed the broadcast, but I'm back here this week, and Aaron is here with us as well. Why don't you say hi, Aaron?
Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Dukette, and I am the Kentucky and West Virginia State Director here for U.S. Term Limits, and jumping on with you guys to talk about what's going on around the country.
Now, Aaron, you're kind of a jack of all trades. You are the state director in Kentucky and West Virginia, sure, but you do an awful lot more than that. I mean, that's kind of the least descriptive title we could come up with for what you do.
National generalist, we call it that.
And let me just let folks know while you're out there in the commenting, ask us some questions. Let us know what state you're in, and I'm going to try to pull some of these up and put them up on the screen and kind of do a little roll call of states. So that'd be kind of cool. And if you have a question, keep it short. We'll try. Don't post a lot because I won't be able to pull it up, and it takes a little while to read. So, and if you can kind of keep your eyes on that once I get going, and let me know if there's anything we should stop and address. Why don't we do this? Because this always has this question come up yet? Why can't we vote on it? Has that happened? Has anyone asked that question?
Not yet, but it usually does.
I haven't seen it as yet, but there are a couple things that I wanted to talk about. And Quinn, that is a perfect lead in to kind of what I was going to be talking about on the broadcast today. So that's very good, but you cannot vote on this. You cannot put it on the ballot, and it's just, it can't be done. And there's a reason why it can't be done. There were a lot of states that had already done it back in the 80s and 90s. And they had voted to put term limits on their own congressional delegation. And one of the Congress critters decided that he didn't like that. So he filed suit. He sued us. And the Supreme Court back in 1995, Thornton versus U.S. Term Limits, made it very clear that the states do not have the authority or the right to limit the terms of their own delegation. In fact, they went on to say that you have to amend the Constitution. That falls under the purview of the Constitution itself. So you can't vote on it. You can't put it on the ballot. And I find it very interesting because we are now in full election season. The general elections are upon us. Almost all of the primaries are behind us. And so here we go. We are in the thick of campaign season. Last week we had the Democrat convention. This week we have the Republican convention that's winding down. I think it's over as of today, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
So it's been very interesting. A lot of candidates, a lot of people will run on term limits as their platform. In fact, I didn't see it during the Democrat convention, but in the Republican convention, President Trump has said that part of his quote unquote drain the swamp initiative, the very first one, is pass congressional term limits. Well, okay, there's only one way that happens, and that is to amend the Constitution. So in order for President Trump to get that done, he has to convince Congress to propose a term limit amendment. What that means, and we already have that legislation sitting in front of the House and sitting in front of the Senate in Washington, D.C. right now. It's there. But that means you have to get 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to vote it out in order for it to go to the states for ratification. 2/3 of the members of Congress in both chambers have to vote it out in order for that to go to the states for ratification. Or the other way to get that done is 2/3 of the states have to pass our resolution, which is what we work on every day of every week, of every month, of every year. They have to pass our resolution calling for a convention to propose an amendment. That amendment being term limits on Congress. So Trump really doesn't have any authority to do that. He can't do an executive order. He can put pressure on both chambers of Congress to try to get it out, but he can't do it.
That's Ken, it's election time. You know how the game is played. Right. People want votes. They're gonna give the red meat out there about what people want just to get them to vote for it. And how many issues do presidential candidates talk about where they have no authority in that area? Most of the issues they talk about, they have no authority to even be part of that decision making process. And so, yeah, unfortunately, hey, love the shout out for congressional term limits. We got to get it out there. I don't care who it is. We want everyone talking about it. But you're right. It doesn't matter if a president wants it. Even the president doesn't even sign on the amendment. Once it's ratified and passed, the president, there's no signature required by the president. It's not like a typical law that a president can veto. So it's completely bypasses the executive office. But hey, we appreciate the shout out. I know President Obama also mentioned term limits for Congress. And so this is definitely not a partisan issue.
Well, you're right. It is a nonpartisan issue. We've got 84% approval nationwide. That's with Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And yes, the approval rating does vary a bit by party, but not much. And so, but it does play well to the cameras. The problem I see with it is that, you know, we are truly a nonpartisan organization, one of the very few that is actually nonpartisan. And when you get a guy like President Trump pushing it, it gets a lot of headway and it gets people on his side of the fence saying, yes, we want to do it and we want to help. When you get Obama doing it, it gets people on his side of the fence saying, yes, we want to do it, we want to help. But both of those figures are very polarizing. So at the end of the day, in my mind, it kind of hurts. The only people who have the actual authority to approve, the only bodies of people who have the authority to amend the Constitution are state legislators. They're the only ones. That's where we need to focus our efforts. And so when you get a candidate running for state house or state senate that says, I'm running on term limits for Congress, get them to sign our pledge, put their money where their mouth is, sign it, put their ink on, put their signature on that issue. And that's how you know who the true patriots are.
You know, today I'm going to just share, I had a phone call from a state representative. I won't mention the state. I had reached out to him to sign the pledge. He calls me back. And after I explain what this is all about, now, granted, I don't know how long he's been in office. I didn't look it up. He was adamantly, he said, term limits are unconstitutional. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. They are now. But what this resolution is for a constitutional amendment to make it constitutional. And he said, oh, I'm totally against term limits. And then I asked him, well, what about presidential term limits? Oh, I'm for that. So he's contradicting himself in one sentence. And then he said, oh, this is a constitutional convention. There's absolutely no way that could be controlled. And I said, well, where are you getting this information from? And he starts going off how he's this constitutional scholar. And I stopped him. I said, okay, what are your sources? Where are you getting this information from? And he just hung up on me. He hung up because he could not defend his own statement, and he's claiming he's some kind of authority. And I shut him down. Unfortunately, it didn't go well, but it's like, you got to challenge these people because they're really, when they're spewing that nonsense, they have no foundation for it. And it's just so frustrating.
Well, anyone can be their own little constitutional scholar. Just read Article 5 and read what it says. It says that it's a convention to propose an amendment.
Yes.
If you passed middle school, grammar, I think you can read that pretty well and understand what the convention is for because it tells you what it's for. So I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah. Well, why don't we use that as the lead in, because I typically try to do a little Article 5 chat in these broadcasts. And so let me pull up my screen. I want to share with you something. And I bet this is where he's getting his information from. So I'm going to pull up, I'm going to just move us out of the screen here, guys. We can still hear everybody. So let me just bring this in. Now, I think it was last time we did the broadcast, we talked about one of the groups out there that opposes Article 5 conventions, and that was the John Birch Society. All right. They've been probably the most vocal opponents of this process for the longest period of time. And so what I wanted, this comes up every legislative session. And when we get close to getting a vote, all these emails go out from around the country. And one of the points that they always make is that James Madison trembled. He actually trembled at the thought of an Article 5 convention being called. Okay. And so what I want to do is I want to go and address this because this comes up quite often. And I'm going to show you, first of all, how John Birch Society does this. And then we're going to actually go to the original source and just see, we're going to take a look at the quote that they use and then put it in context. And I think you'll clearly see he did not fear an Article 5 convention. So with that said, real quick, here is a screenshot. This is a presentation. Unfortunately, the logo on the bottom, this is the John Birch Society. The gentleman doing this presentation was the former president of JBS. I think he's the president emeritus now or whatever. He's still involved with them. So here's the quote. It says, James Madison, quote, having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention, which assembled under very propitious circumstances, meaning favorable, I should tremble for the result of a second, unquote. And that was written in November 2nd, 1788. So yes, Madison did write that in a letter, but that's all they say about it. They never provide the context of the letter. They never share their letter, and they never read anything else in the letter. So,
let's do that because I think that's important.
I do too. So let's get the context so we understand what Madison was talking about. So here's the letter. Now, the first thing, the entire context of everything he writes in this is he is answering, the letter is to George Tuberville. Tuberville wrote Madison, and this is his response. And the question that he asked him had to do with what was happening in New York. And Madison wrote this: you wish to know my sentiments on the project of another general convention as suggested by New York. So that's the context. So let me share with you a little background. This was November 1788. The Constitution was ratified 4 months earlier by the ninth state, putting into place. It was New Hampshire. So 4 months ago, it got ratified officially. Now, the federal government had not begun yet. It wouldn't be until another 4 months in March of 1789 when the federal government begins. None of the states at this point had elected any of their senators or members of Congress. So we're at this interim period, okay? We ended the Articles of Confederation. We're about to begin the new government under the Constitution. The state of New York, let me show you this. Now, when New York ratified at their convention the Constitution, they had ratified it after New Hampshire. I think they were number 10 or 11. With their ratification, they sent in 33 amendments that they wanted. Basically, they wanted to open up the whole Constitution, the delegates there. And the governor of New York sent a circular letter to all of the other governors. And what he wanted them to urge their state legislature to call a convention. Let me read this to you. Not the whole thing. It says, we, the members of the convention of this state, have deliberately and maturely considered the Constitution proposed for the United States. Several articles in it appear so exceptional to a majority of us that nothing but the fullest confidence of obtaining a revision of them by a general convention. So basically, he was seeking a complete new rewrite of the Constitution. And that is what Governor of New York, his name was Clinton, he was advocating, and he wanted this to take place very quickly. And so that's what Madison is addressing in his letter. All right, that's the context. Now, let's go further into Madison's letter, because he starts to explain why this is a bad idea. Number one, he says, listen, I wish we amended it before we even adopted it in Philadelphia, but right now we have to wait. And he goes on to explain the reasons why. What he does is, in the very letter the John Birch Society uses as a con, Article 5, they always call it a con, meaning it can rewrite the Constitution. Right here, Madison describes the two types of conventions. It says right here, number 2, a convention cannot be called without the unanimous consent of the parties who are to be bound by it, if first principles are to be recurred to. That's a constitutional convention. That is what New York wanted. First principles talks about foundation. Notice he says, or without the previous application of 2/3 of the state legislatures, if the forms of the Constitution are to be pursued. That's an Article 5 convention right there. It takes 2/3, right? That is what we're working on. And that is a completely different convention. That is to propose an amendment. So right in the very letter they use, and he lift his quote out of context, you have the two types of conventions. This is why they never share the letter, because they want people to believe that an Article 5 convention is a constitutional convention. It is not. And this clearly shows that. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but here's the quote. So I highly recommend you look this up, read the letter in its full context. What Madison says is basically this: because of the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists was such a battle between them, and in some states it was still a battle, especially in New York, that now is not the right time. We could, first of all, he says this: there's no way we'll get enough states to call either a constitutional convention to rewrite it, or enough states to even propose amendments. And he said this: the best way and the most efficient way to do it is through Congress. Okay, that would be the simplest way at this period in time, until let's have some experience under this government before we start tinkering with it and recommending amendments. And that's his whole argument. And that's why he said here, that's where that quote comes from: having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention, which assembled under very propitious circumstances, I should tremble for the result of a second, meeting in the present temper of America and under all the disadvantages I had mentioned. So that is the context. And he even mentions how, guys, if we were to do this, we would look foolish over in Europe. You know, we would be financially unstable, because now we have a foundation. We've been recognized. If we were to do this, that could jeopardize everything. So the context is everything on this whole debate. It was not an Article 5 convention he opposed. It was a constitutional convention. But look at what they do. This comes from the John Birch magazine, The New American. Look how they changed the quote. Let me show back to you real quick. Notice how here it said, number 3, if a general convention were to take place for the avowed and sole purpose of revising the Constitution. That's what Madison wrote. Look what they do in their own publication. They change it. They write this: if a general convention, bracket, convened by Congress according to Article 5 of the Constitution for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. They added all of that as though it's a quote almost, and completely rip the context out of his letter. Isn't that unbelievable?
You know, that is the problem, and that is revisionist history, and that is why there are so many people out there that are confused about so many different things, because this one is very easy to get to the truth of. All you have to do is go to the original language of the Constitution, read Article 5, and it's right there. Okay? You can go to the Federalist Papers themselves. You can read this letter from Madison himself. You can get to the truth of it. But when they start revising history and they start lying, these are lies, people. I'm just going to call them what they are. And when they start lying about the true history and what's actually happened, it becomes, well, it's just deceitful. I mean, it truly is. And so our job, as part of what we do, is to get the truth out there. And that's exactly what we're doing. So Ken Quinn, when you talk about these things and show the actual documents in context, in their full original form, it's very easy for people to seek the truth and to find out that they're being lied to. And they should be upset. They should be upset about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys know what my history and how upset I got over this stuff. And that's why I like to expose it, because I was being duped by it myself. And so I am going to post this letter in the comments so you guys can read it yourself and file this away, because this is going to come up and you need to know the truth. And now Madison had a bunch of other quotes about there's a bunch of quotes. He mentioned the second convention that New York wanted to call. And so this is not just one letter you'll find this in. So the evidence is overwhelming. Now we'll do another episode. I even played it for you, and how he takes Federalist 40 and completely changes what Madison was saying about that. So, we'll try to pick this apart and share it with everybody.
These are things that we do every week. And Quinn, I really enjoy the parts of the Article 5 that you do every week when we do this. But I noticed a quote on the thread, some of the comments, that said, we just need to simply follow the Constitution as written. And while I agree with that in theory, there's a major, major problem with that, and we need to address it. The Constitution as written doesn't necessarily matter anymore. Let me show you guys something.
Yeah.
This is the Constitution of the United States. Okay. I don't know if you guys can read that.
I didn't know you had that original. That's great, man.
Yeah. Can you read that? This is the Constitution of the United States of America. I got this from the Library of Congress. In the very first pages of it is the Constitution as written. Okay. And you can see that. I don't know if you guys can read it or not. Maybe this is a bad idea trying to hold this up to my camera, but you can see that. Okay. And this was published I ordered it from the Library of Congress. This is the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. This thing is 2,800 pages long. It weighs about 20 pounds. Okay. It is as interpreted by the United States Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States, as interpreted. Okay. Everything you can think of, everything that is wrong with the federal government and the law has been approved by the Supreme Court, and it's in here. This thing is the Constitution, not that little 27-page pamphlet or 10-page pamphlet or wherever that everybody says, follow this, follow this. No, this is what the federal government follows. And it gets bigger every year. Every time the Supreme Court comes down or hands down a decision, they're effectively amending the Constitution. There you go.
We want to get back. We want to get back to that pocket Constitution. All right, that's our goal. And you talk about constitutions. James Madison, he said that in his day, and I'll have to share that maybe next week. His issue was how the general welfare and the general welfare clause, general welfare clause and common defense clause was being expanded upon, exactly like you were talking about, Ken. How the federal is going to expand the powers of the government by how it was being interpreted back in his day. And he said, in essence, we have two constitutions, the one with enumerating powers being the pocket one that we hold today, and the one being interpreted by the courts. And so nothing changed.
What was the reason for the 11th Amendment to the Constitution?
The 11th Amendment was to limit the expanse of the Supreme Court. They were going beyond their bounds, and so that's exactly right. So
it was done in direct. It was as direct cause and effect. Supreme Court came down with a decision that nobody liked, and they were trying to usurp their own power or overextend their own power, rather. And they said, "Yeah, no, here you go," and they shut them down.
Obey the Constitution. I was like, listen, folks. There's 27 amendments to the Constitution. This is how we do it. This is how we form the government that we want to live under, because if the government is not working, which it's not, hello, wake up, get your head out of the sand. The government is not working the way it's supposed to. The only way to fix it is not by voting for people and thinking they're going to change it from within. It's changing the structure of it. One of the structural changes we need is getting rid of these career politicians that go down to Washington, D.C. and turn it into a lifelong, cushy career on the backs of all of us. And that's what this effort is all about. And get behind it. Let's get this done. But we need your help.
Quinn, I actually agree with the commenter, right? Yeah, we should follow the Constitution as written. Part of that Constitution is Article 5, which is a provision for proposing and ratifying amendments to the Constitution. In other words, the framers did not produce the Constitution and say, here's it written absolutely in stone, never amend this, it's going to be codified forever. No, they knew there would have to be adaptations made and amendments made over the course of the nation's history to adapt to circumstances that change and address problems that arise. So I agree. So get on board.
Amend to defend.
Right.
There you go.
That's simple.
There you go. And that's absolutely right, Aaron. That's a very good point.
And we're going to get term limits for the people.
Well, and the people are the ones that are going to have to. The people are the ones that are going to have to do it. I mean, let's face it. We are Americans. This is what we do. We are a self-governing society. We are supposed to elect those representatives to do our bidding, not their own. And we've lost sight of that a long time ago. But Washington, D.C. is broken. The current crop of members in Washington, D.C. have no interest whatsoever in fixing it because they thrive on it. That's how they're enriching themselves and gaining more power. So, okay, I mean, let's face it. Human nature is to try to gather as much wealth and as much power under your own control as humanly possible. That is human nature. Denying that doesn't make sense. So let's take away their ability to do it. That's what we're trying to do.
And we cannot change human nature at the ballot box. Okay. So that is why we have to limit their power by how long they hold their seats of office. And so the framers, this was a pretty heated discussion, and it's a shame that they did not include term limits for Congress initially. But many of them understood the way you protect liberty and freedom is with rotating these people out of office so none of them consolidate so much power that they destroy our lives and put us under bondage. Now, we are under bondage now, and this is how we fix it.
Right. There is a comment on the Facebook page that I won't read the whole thing, but the very last part of it says, so short of collecting signatures, what else do we do?
Okay. Well, elections coming up, right? People want your vote. You tell them you won't vote for them unless they sign our pledge and promise to support this resolution if they get elected. That's number one. Okay. Nobody gets my vote for free anymore. If they're not going to support what 82% of the American people want, then I would not trust them with anything else. Number two, get involved, sign our petition because that's how we communicate with you. But we need you involved. We need you getting more petitions signed, writing letters to the editor, making phone calls. We need you going to the capitals, meeting with your legislators, bringing friends, bringing family, putting pressure, writing letters to the local newspapers. This has got to be a grassroots thing, because if it's not on the hot priority plate of these legislators, they're never going to support it or pass it. And so you got to turn the fire up on these folks once they're in office. And now is the best time to be talking about it.
What we need to have happen is we need 34 states to pass our resolution. Our resolution calls for a convention of the states for the purpose of proposing a term limits on Congress amendment, period. That's it. Nothing else is on the table. We need 34 states to pass that resolution. That means you need to make sure that your representative in your state, in the House, your state House representative, your state senator, everywhere except Nebraska, signs this Article 5 petition, votes for our resolution, calls for that convention to propose the amendment. That's the only way this is going to happen, period. But you are going to have to put pressure on your own state assembly members. You do that, we'll get it done. So it's up to you.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll call that a day.
Yeah.
Good job, gentlemen. That was fun. And we appreciate all of you out there that have joined us. Thanks for your support. I know many of you come here week after week, and are really getting behind this effort. Share this video with your friends, get more people to join the term limits revolution, and we're going to get this done. So thank you so much. Have a great day, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.